Dr. Martin. And thank you, Sendil, Comrade Sendil, for inviting me to participate in this important discussion, and also which is quite an interesting discussion, given the fact that the discussion is happening in India, and the topic of the discussion is about the outcome of Sri Lanka's election, and which is quite significant when you consider the fact that such interest is very rare. Normally, the way it works is actually the interest about the Indian elections and the outcome of Indian elections dominates the political discussions in Sri Lanka compared to the other way around. So in that sense, I think this is an important meeting. And thank you very much for having me for the discussion, which I think and I apologize because even though I understand Tamil perfectly, I'm not able to speak well in Tamil. So I will stick to English, and I think in case of need, I think there might be a possibility to provide a summary of the points that I am trying to make. And so I will, given the time limitations, I will quickly go into the topic. And the topic that I have been informed is the politics of the presidential election in Sri Lanka, and the outcome of the presidential election outcome of Sri Lanka. So, as we all know, on the 21st of September, Sri Lanka went into elections to elect the 9th executive president of the country. And to the surprise of many, especially inside the country, many who remain loyal to the old guard of the traditional ruling bloc, the 42% of the voting population elected Anurukumar Disanayake, who is like a 55-year-old leader of the People's Liberation Front, popularly known as the JVP, as the president of the country. So regardless of the attempts to downplay the political significance of the election outcome, the alliance known as the National People's Power, or the NPP, led by the JVP, emerging victorious in the elections, has certainly cast a ripples across the political system. Especially when you keep watching the Sri Lankan news these days, you can see how much it has basically unsettled, or to a certain extent terrified, the old guard of the political class that ruled Sri Lanka for over 75 years actually. So here we are talking about a system that was dependent on two main political parties founded by the political elite of the colonial bourgeoisie for over 75 years. So since the foundation of the JVP in 1965, it historically represented, or it is considered that it historically represented, the aspirations of the marginalized Sinhala rural peasantry. And although its class bases have faced significant changes in the recent decades, which means that it cannot be understood as the party of the rural peasantry anymore, because it has a large kind of presence in the urban middle class as well. The uprising stage, there were two uprising stages by the JVP in the past, and the uprising stage by the JVP in 1971, which is known as April Uprising, became known as the first ever attempt to capture state power through an armed insurrection, which was followed by a second attempt, staged in a 3-year-long insurgency, happened between 1988 and 1990. And both insurgencies ended in failures after being crushed by the state through brutal counter-insurgency campaigns, slaughtering tens of thousands of mostly Sinhala poor youth. And I would add a personal note to this section, because the thing is, actually, I belong to the second generation of the JVPs. And because I entered into politics, I became politicized as a teenager during the late 80s, and worked with the JVP as a student activist at the time. And both the President Anurukumara and myself, and also the Foreign Minister Vijitha Herath, we were all from the same generation who joined the JVP during the same period while the JVP was operating as an underground movement. And so therefore there's a personal connection to the politics of the JVP that I have, before I became a full-time journalist, actually. And about Anuru Kumara is like he's hailing from a remote village in the dry zone in north central province in the island. And he rose to the leadership of the JVP after joining the underground JVP in the late 80s, as I said, as a student activist, an unknown student activist. And until mid-90s, he was a lesser-known party activist, although there was a considerable knowledge about him among the politically active university students groups. And what happened in 1994 is actually ending a 4-year-long clandestine political activity to reorganize the party. JVP decided to enter into electoral politics and made an announcement, announcing a surprise comeback to contest elections in August 1994. And that was like a 11-year-old period that JVP remained as a proscribed party from 1983 to 1994. And after the second uprising was completely crushed and almost the entire leadership was wiped out, there was a widespread belief that would mark the end of the JVP. And that is why it became a surprise to many when the JVP decided and made a statement saying that they are planning to contest elections. Many of them survived as exile activists, while there was a group of people who are operating inside the country, and I, with many other comrades, were part of that clandestine group who operated inside the country. And so Anuru Kumara Disanayaka's rise into power started towards the late 90s, actually, even though he was not known that much towards the early 90s. By the time like 97, 98, he rose into prominence because he became the national organizer of the JVP student wing, the Socialist Students Union. And through that, he got appointed to the party central committee. And from that onwards, everybody knows, as we know, the rest is actually history. And the one important point is that actually he became the leader of the JVP in 2014 in a party convention where the leadership was handed over by the last surviving member of the JVP's old political Politburo, deciding to hand over power to him and basically crowning him as the leader of the JVP. So this is a kind of a brief history about JVP's, Anuru Kumara's history as a party activist. And so in that sense, I think the JVP's rise to power is undoubtedly a historical moment in the politics within the Sinhala society, which does not have parallel in the history of the island. I'm saying this because a movement that attempted to capture power through armed means and went through a brutal military oppression unleashed by the traditional ruling bloc, not once but twice, and especially losing its almost entire leadership during the second uprising, capturing state power through popular consent is certainly needs serious evaluation. And that is why actually there's quite a lot of confusion and misinterpretations of the events that was happening in Sri Lanka in the past, especially from the Indian left, as well as from the left-leaning political groups and individuals outside Sri Lanka. So what is the significance of JVP gaining state power? So in my opinion, I think JVP is the last remaining actor that belonged to all political power configuration in the Sinhala society, because there was a certain political power configuration that was set up at the end of colonial rule in nominal end of colonial rule in 1948. And Sri Lanka was, ruled in turns by the United National Party and Sri Lanka Freedom Party, or coalitions that were led by these two parties. And JVP's rise into power and capturing state power has actually ended this cycle and has set a new process in motion. So I think in that sense, JVP is the last rational actor that belonged to the old power configuration in the Sinhala political landscape. And that is the only functional party inside the Sinhala political landscape. That is the only functional party. And as if you look at the current sort of, configuration, you will see that United National Party is no more. It's just nominal existence. And Sri Lanka Freedom Party is no more. It's a nominal existence. And all the parties contesting elections are actually newly formed alliances and joint fronts. And even JVP did not contest the elections as JVP, they contest the elections as NPP, even though actually the core of the NPP is JVP and the only political party in the NPP is the JVP. There's no other political parties in that coalition. It's just a kind of like, when you look at it, they are saying that there are 21 organizations. It's a front of 21 organizations. But out of these 21 organizations, at least 7 or 8 organizations are directly affiliated to JVP. And some of the organizations are just nominally organizations which are not existing in organizational form, except certain individuals identifying themselves with these names. So in that sense, actually, NPP's electoral success needs to be understood as electoral success of the JVP, because NPP did not exist before, and I don't think it will exist in the future as well after JVP gaining power. So there's a false assumption that JVP is the only political actor that has never been tested with state power. Now, this is a false assumption that has been repeatedly publicized, not simply by analysts inside the country, but even the people who are interested in Sri Lankan politics, who are observing the Sri Lankan political developments. They are also fall into this kind of false assumption and come to the conclusion JVP is the only political actor that has never been tested with state power. Now, this is wrong. This is absolutely a false assumption. Because if that argument stands, then the Trotskyist Lanka Samasamaja Party and the Communist Party of Sri Lanka have also not been tested in power as single political parties. Now, both Samasamaja Party and the Communist Party were tested in power as members of the ruling coalitions in the 60s and 70s. They never ruled the country as one single political party. They became partners of ruling coalitions in 2 different time periods. So likewise, the JVP entered into its first coalition in 2001 August, deciding to setting up a probational government with the then President Chandrika Bandaranaike's People's Alliance government, which lasted for 4 months and then they lost. Then again, in April 2004, JVP joined the United People's Freedom Alliance, again led by Chandrika Bandaranaike and Mahinda Rajapaksa. And they went to the extent of accepting 4 cabinet portfolios, out of one was actually which one was held by Anurukumar Disanayake himself. He was the cabinet minister for agriculture and irrigation affairs during this coalition, during the rule of this coalition government from 2004 to April 2004 to June 2004 2005, when JVP decided to leave the coalition. And after leaving the coalition in June 2005, they did not completely distance themselves from the politics of the coalition. And what they did, they spearheaded the entire election campaign as the main coalition partner of the United People's Freedom Alliance, led by Chandrika and Mahinda, after deciding to nominate Mahinda as the presidential candidate in 2005. And they actually led the entire publicity campaign or the propaganda campaign to bring Mahinda to power. And they were the main speakers on the election platforms. They carried out massive poster campaigns backing Mahinda Rajapaksa's election campaign. But the only thing is, after the elections, they refrained from taking ministerial posts, while pledging that they would support the government if the government decides to wage war against the Tamil Liberation Movement. And they themselves got involved in mobilizing the Sinhala masses, the rural Sinhala poor and the urban working class, to back the war effort of the Mahinda Rajapaksas. And they remained so until 2010. And the first time there was a break with Mahinda, I mean, a decisive break with the Mahinda Rajapaksa's politics happened in January 2010 when the JVP decided to field General Sarath Fonseca, the former army commander, as the candidate of the Common Front. They founded. JVP was the main partner of that front, and they wanted to basically get rid of Rajapaksas and to make Sarath Fonseca as the president. So this history is quite important because this history, when you go through this history, especially the history starting from 1994, there's nothing much left wing in the history of JVP. It was started as a party that broke away from Comrade Shanmugadasan's Ceylon Communist Party Maoist in 1965, and then staged two uprisings, one in 70s, as I said, and the other in late 80s, and then almost completely crushed, and then made a comeback in the mid-90s as electoral party. And the last 30 years, they remained in electoral politics, but going through a deep transformation of the ideological outlook, of the class basis of the movement, and also of the political strategies that they adopted. And one of the core strategies that they adopted was to back the military means as the one and only solution for the demand of the Tamil people for self-determination. And this was actually quite lucidly and openly and bluntly said by one of the JVP's, as Comrade Sendil mentioned about it. One of JVP's Politburo member, K.D. Lalkantha, who is also a member of the ruling NPP, the current government, NPP's National Executive Committee, while addressing a meeting organized by the JVP or the NPP, meeting of it's a rally of former military officers, and it's actually a massive rally, and they were building this. I mean, they were basically forming this. I mean, they formed this organization just before. I mean, like just after the elections, the 2019 elections, and then they started expanding this former. It's called ex-military officers association. And they started building district organizations for this association. And addressing one of these district meetings in the central part of the country, this K.D. Lalkantha, the member of JVP's Politburo and the National Executive Committee of NPP, the ruling NPP, he said, there are only two parties in this country who believed and openly said, the only solution to the Tamil problem is a military one. And then he asked the audience, who are from the military, he asked, can you name these two parties? And nobody was responding. So he said, it is not the UNP and it is not the SLFP. And then he said, it is actually two parties, were the JVP and there's the other party called National Heritage Party, or JHU, which is the hardcore Sinhala fascist party actually. So he was basically identifying JVP with the hardcore Sinhala fascist party, JHU, saying that we are the only two parties which believed and openly said, who did not hesitate to say that the only solution to Tamil issue is a military one. And he said, so what we did, and he said it to the officers at the meeting, what we did was actually we mobilized the people to support the war when you were fighting the war. So you fought the war facing the enemy, and we mobilized the people to fall in line with your war effort. So basically he was explaining, he was saying there had been a division of labor between the army and the JVP. The army fought the war and the JVP organized the Sinhala masses, including the urban working class and the rural poor, to back the war effort and to make sure that the genocidal onslaught come into a conclusion. And as soon as the war ended, JP carried out a massive poster campaign congratulating the army for liberating the motherland from the from Tamil terrorism. And there was, I mean, still we all have this poster that they put up. And with the end of the war, JP started to change their political strategy, not ideological position, but the political strategy, because they knew the total eradication of the liberation tigers of Tamil Eelam in the war has strengthened Rajapaksa as they never expected, as JP never anticipated. So JP initially tried to gain the credit for the war victory, saying that it was we actually who dragged Rajapaksa to the war. And then JP leader openly said it in a meeting. It was we who dragged Mahinda Rajapaksa to the war, saying that this can be done. But when this slogan didn't work that much, which did not affect the popularity of Rajapaksas, they decided the JP's political strategy was to decisively break away from Rajapaksa and then mobilize people against Rajapaksa, actually. And that process came to a kind of culmination point on the 21st of September by JVP gaining power. And on the 14th of November, I think, from what I have heard so far, and there's a huge possibility that JP would gain almost 2/3 in the parliament. Almost. I wouldn't say they will definitely gain it, but I think there's a highly likelihood that they might. And so the thing is, it's a quite a contradictory legacy of the JVP. On one hand, JP used to represent the aspirations of less privileged, oppressed masses in the South. And then in the mid-90s, with their decision to come into open electoral politics, this connection with the rural masses and the oppressed classes gradually changed. And by now, JP has become more like a party of the middle class, urban middle class, where actually the Sinhala nationalism is extremely successful. Sinhala nationalist appeal is quite extremely successful among the Sinhala urban middle class. So JP, while trying to preserve their base in the rural areas, they have actually made a kind of aggressive intrusion into the urban working class, urban middle class. And when you look at the composition of the JP support base now, you can easily see it is largely supported by the urban working class as well, urban middle class as well. So without taking into consideration these important transformations that has happened in the class structure and the class basis of the JVP, it is absolutely wrong to interpret JVP's victory as a victory of the left. There's a certain truth to it, as to the extent of JVP's ability, success in basically wiping out the traditional ruling, nearly wiping out the traditional ruling bloc from the parliamentary politics. And more, if we had noticed, the past week, including the entire Rajapaksa clan, many of the politicians from the UNP and the SLFP kind of stock have announced that they are not contesting the elections, which is actually the kind out of fear that they would lose. And on the other hand, JVP is making kind of, they have created a kind of enthusiasm among the younger generations in the Sinhala society that there will be important changes in the political system, in the way the governance was actually carried out, and it will be a new country. The only thing that they have not been able to convince, the only force, was actually the non-Sinhala, non-Buddhist population, especially the Tamil population and to a certain extent the Muslim population. They have not entirely been successful in convincing them to consider them as the kind of genuine alternative to what existed in the last 76 years. So in that sense, I think, I would more like to use the opportunity to discuss the matter instead of going on about and sharing only my opinion. So I would like to thank especially to Comrade Sendil and to Comrade Pandian for inviting me for this discussion, and I would like to participate in any kind of Q&A process to elaborate the points that I have already made. And thank you very much.